And it's December. I know I say this every single time, but I'm not sure how it happened. We're almost finished with 2024, despite it feeling like the year only started a few weeks ago, and I'm not joking. I look at my calendar and I really cannot believe it. There are just 4 weeks left until the end of the year and the start of my next reading challenge, despite not being finished with the ones I set in December 2023. So I'm not worried, honest. I may sound a little bit panicked, but I'm not quite as nervous as maybe I should be. Anyhow, less of the rambling, let's get on with the episode. Here I am, no spoilers, as opinion-filled as ever and ready to roll, all of which means it's time for the latest episode of Being Bookish. This week I am going to be travelling to a fantasy realm where gods sleep, vampires dominate, and the world is secretly on the verge of a war that has been simmering for hundreds of years. I'm going to introduce you to Poppy and Hawke, the main characters in Jennifer L Armentrout's From Blood and Ash. I'm your host Ray, self-confessed bookworm, introvert hermit, and long-term depression sufferer. Join me on my journey through my ever-growing to-be-read pile and enjoy the latest of my 100% spoiler-free book reviews. Though I've actually read a lot of romantasy novels in the last few years, most obviously Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, the first 3 books in the Blood and Ash series actually sat on my shelf for more than 18 months, ignored as I added more and more books to the TBR that I read before I even thought about this one. I do think that reading Fall of Ruin and Wrath, a newer series by Armentrout, did put me off just a little, as I couldn't get into that story and really struggled to read it. I honestly believe that reading about Fae is not my thing. Despite that book even being content I was reading for a book tour. But yeah, we're not here to talk about that one. A maiden, chosen from birth to usher in a new era, Poppy's life has never been her own. The life of the maiden is solitary, never to be touched, never to be looked upon, never to be spoken to, never to experience pleasure, waiting for the day of her ascension. She would rather be with the gods, fighting back the evil that took her family, than preparing to be found worthy by the gods. But the choice has never been hers. A duty. The entire kingdom's future rests on Poppy's shoulders, something she's not even quite sure she wants for herself, because a maiden has a heart and a soul and longing, and when Hawke, a golden-eyed guard, honour bound to ensure her ascension, enters her life, destiny and duty become tangled with desire and need. He incites her anger, makes her question everything she believes in, and tempts her with the forbidden. A kingdom. Forsaken by the gods and feared by mortals, a fallen kingdom is rising once more, determined to take back what they believe is theirs through violence and vengeance. And as the shadow of those cursed draws closer, the line between what is forbidden and what is right becomes blurred. Poppy is not only on the verge of losing her heart and being found unworthy by the gods, but also her life, when every blood-soaked thread that holds her world together begins to unravel. As appears to be the pattern with many new romantasy novels, From Blood and Ash is a bit of a lengthy read, at only a little under 700 pages. But surprisingly, it was a rather speedy one for me, which ends on a massive cliffhanger and had me reaching for the second and third books in quick succession. The story begins with a tantalising taste of rebellion when Poppy, disguised as a local tavern girl, visits a tavern called the Red Pearl. There she meets Hawke Flynn, a magnetic and confident guard whose boldness awakens something within her. Their flirtatious encounter is interrupted by her fear of being discovered, but it marks the beginning of a connection that will challenge everything Poppy has been taught. As Poppy returns to her duties, the kingdom's danger quickly becomes more evident. The Craven, monstrous creatures believed to be cursed by the enemy Atlanteans, grow increasingly aggressive, threatening the borders of the kingdom and its people. On an evening trip to the palace gardens, her personal guard is shot through the chest with an arrow, and Poppy is forced to fight to escape as the Dark One's guards attack. Unable to go without a guard, Hawke, the enigmatic stranger Poppy can't help but being fascinated by, is assigned the duty, and though Poppy doesn't relax, his proximity raises the stakes as she immediately recognises him from the Red Pearl. His presence is electrifying. His teasing and provocative questions force her to confront the rigidity of her life as the Maiden. Their growing intimacy, though not physical, disrupts Poppy's carefully maintained composure as she begins to question not only her feelings for him, but also the very foundations of her role as the Maiden, especially when she is constantly being reminded of the danger she is in due to the fate of the previous Maiden who died at the hands of the mysterious Dark One. She also begins to doubt the society she lives in. As Poppy and Hawke's relationship deepens, so do Poppy's doubts about the Ascended, the ruling class who claim to serve the gods. The Duke, one of the kingdom's leaders, is revealed to be cruel and abusive, punishing Poppy for perceived failures. Meanwhile, his wife, the Duchess, manipulates her with reminders of her sacred duty, reinforcing the heavy burden of her role. Poppy's world begins to unravel as she learns that the Craven may not exactly be the mindless monsters she believed, and whispers of the Ascended's connection to these creatures sow seeds of doubt about their supposed divine nature. The story takes a dramatic turn when the Craven launch a devastating attack, forcing Poppy to flee the kingdom alongside Hawke and a small group of guards. Obviously, there's also been a horrific scene where the Duke is discovered having been killed in a very violent manner. During their perilous journey, Poppy reveals her impressive combat skills, having been trained by her previous guard, further deepening the bond between her and Hawke. However, as they face ambushes and danger, the truth about Hawke's identity comes to light. Hawke is revealed to be an Atlantean, the very enemy Poppy has been raised to fear. Not only that, he is the Dark One, Castile, the man she has been taught to fear since she was a girl. He is the man who killed her predecessor, the one who wants nothing more than to see her family and friends destroyed. His mission is not to protect her, but to use her as leverage in the Atlanteans' fight to reclaim power from the Ascended. This betrayal is compounded by shock revelations about the Ascension. Poppy learns that the ritual she has spent her life preparing for is a lie. The Ascended are not chosen by the gods, but are vampiric beings who sustain themselves by draining the blood of mortals. The Craven, far from being Atlantean curses, are the horrifying result of failed ascensions. These truths shatter Poppy's understanding of her world, leaving her angry, betrayed, and uncertain of her place in the conflict. Despite her fury at Hawke's betrayal, Poppy cannot deny her lingering feelings for him. Hawke, too, reveals that he believes Poppy's destiny is far greater than that of the role of the Maiden. She displays unusual powers, including the ability to heal and to sense emotion, hinting at a heritage that ties her to the Atlanteans quite closely. Hawke's belief that Poppy is key to the future of his people creates a complex dynamic between them as their relationship balances on a knife's edge of passion and mistrust. Romantasy is a genre that has really grown in popularity thanks to series like A Court of Thorns and Roses. We do not need to talk about how much I didn't enjoy that particular set of books right now. At present, the Blood and Ash series has 5 books at its core, with a 6th due for release sometime next year. There is also a 4-book sub-series, which I think may actually be a pseudo-prequel, but I'm not sure. Having looked at the notes, I'm still quite unclear of it. If you know, please do get in touch and let me know if they are worth reading, given the fact that I did actually like these far more than I liked anything by Sarah J. Maas. There were a considerable number of 1-star reviews this time to choose from, especially when I consider how many reviews I didn't get to choose from for Polo. When you hear how many reviews there were in total, you won't be surprised at how many options I had. This 1-star review from Ali was among the shortest and most spoiler-free, and also the one that was most free of profanity. She did not like From Blood and Ash, and she said, "A young woman has the bad luck of being the maiden, which is supposed to be impressive but just means that she's a virgin who can't drive. Hello, shades of Clueless. Poppy is named after Penelope, the goddess of wisdom, a fact brutal in its irony, seeing as how Poppy is so stupid that her continued existence is a miracle. She is dreading her ascension, an event that is mentioned hundreds of times and is kind of described by the last 50 pages, but not really. The primary side character of this book is Poppy's stomach, which drops, dips, churns, roils, rolls, sinks, tumbles, and clenches with the ease of an Olympic gymnast. If you're wondering why I haven't mentioned the plot, it's because there isn't one. I don't know how this story continues on for several books, and I don't care to find out. Is there more to Hawke Flynn than meets the eye? There can't possibly be less. So sure. Shivers, shudders, smirks. Are you a fan of chemistry and sexual tension? If so, I have bad news." Unlike Polo, a book that I had to be creative with when searching for reviews online because it was released before the advent of the internet and sites like Goodreads, From Blood and Ash is giving when it comes to reviews. However, as with a considerable number of romantasy and fantasy novels that have garnered attention from readers on sites like Instagram and TikTok, the 1-star reviews on Goodreads were, for the most part, incredibly long, spoiler-filled, and very detailed. Often sarcastic, but definitely hilarious to read. Specifically focusing, in this instance, on the word honeydew, the reviews are cutting and entertaining. They are also, sadly, too long to use in an episode, but I will make sure to post links to a few of my favourites in the episode notes because they are a very good read. Opinions are incredibly personal, and that's far more obvious with some books than others. More so, it seems, when it comes to books that appear to be incredibly popular. Look at the 2,193,045 ratings and 270,851 reviews for Fourth Wing, with 19,891 being lengthy 1-star reviews. And yeah, that number, the mind boggles. In fact, the review number for ACOTAR is over 3 million. So yes, there are a lot of people reading and reviewing these books. On Goodreads, the overall rating for From Blood and Ash is 4.22, which isn't bad, and on Storygraph it's a little lower at 4.1. The reviews aren't so explanatory on Storygraph as ever, because the site gives reviewers more opportunities to submit immediate feelings without actually writing a review. While this can be great if you're in a hurry and has been really useful for me, it doesn't make it easy to write a summary like this one. From Blood and Ash was first released in 2020, which is only 4 years ago, so in the scheme of things, not that long. As with many of the more new adult romantic fantasy novels, it has proved incredibly popular with people who enjoy writing reviews, whether positive or negative. And at present, it has 672,627 ratings and 61,943 written reviews. Do I feel ridiculous saying these incredibly large numbers? Yes, I do. Out of that pool, 80% or 545,783 readers gave it a positive 4 or 5-star rating, while at the other end of the spectrum, 5% or 40,227 of reviewers didn't enjoy From Blood and Ash and gave it a 1 or 2-star rating. Mysteriously, 3% of readers either didn't rate it or have not been counted in the number of reviews and ratings left for the book, because the total number of reviews only adds up to 97%. So where is that 3% Goodreads? How has it vanished? Lindsay Darling, great name by the way, left the book a 5-star review, though the start of the book didn't seem so promising for her. She said, "I almost DNF'd this at 16%. I was bored. There were info dumps everywhere. The narrator was blah. The plot wasn't moving. Goodness, even the time in the book wasn't moving. Pretty sure at 16% not even 24 hours had passed in this book world. I told myself I would jump ship if this did not improve by the 20% mark. Darn did it improve. I've never been so glad I didn't jump ship. Okay, that's a lie. I was also really glad I didn't jump ship during season 5 of The Vampire Diaries. Suddenly, there was dialogue, and not just dialogue, witty banter. The narrator showed she was a badass. There was a male lead who did something other than be gorgeous. The villains started to make their presence known in despicable ways that made my blood boil. We had side characters who were super likeable. We had a slow burn romance that didn't feel forced. I'll be honest, witty banter alone will keep me reading, but then literally all of the other tropes I adore showed up, and I was just... And here she put in a lot of smirking emojis that I can't really express via audio for the rest of the book. I finished about 5 minutes ago, so I'm not even sure I'm typing coherent sentences right now. The book is that good. Just push through the boring beginning. You can do it! I know that I have said this before, probably multiple times, but I'm really in my fantasy phase right now. That's not to say that I am only reading this genre. I'm not. At this moment, I am reading a Christmas romantic comedy by Heidi Swan in readiness for book club meeting in a couple of weeks. There are some books I have loved, such as Godkiller by Hannah Kaner and The House of the Dead duology by Nikki Powell-Preto, which I really think you should read if you haven't already. There are a lot of good books and fantasy authors out there if you look beyond the ones that are completely consuming book-related social media. Not that all popular books are bad. In fact, a lot of them are pretty good. Remember, of course, this is my personal view, and opinions are subjective when it comes to art. Anyway, now I've told you about other people's views, let's get down to it. Here are my thoughts on From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L Armentrout, completely spoiler-free and 100% honest. Did I like the book? This is a complicated one because while on one side of things I really enjoyed it, it was an easy, relaxing read that provided me with an escape from the real world, which over the last few weeks has been sort of unpleasant, but I will get down to that at another point when I'm not talking about my opinion of this book. On the other side of things, was it written in the same way as some other books that I have enjoyed this year? No. But that doesn't take away my enjoyment of this book. I liked the characters. I found that I read through it very easily. There wasn't a moment where I sat there thinking, oh my God, what am I doing? How am I reading this? And considered DNFing it, as I did with several other books that I have picked up this month. In fact, this month has not been the best month for reading. I don't think I've rated anything above 3.75, and I read 9 books, so that's not incredible. But I am going to get down to my view of the book, taking a sort of not unrelated detour. I have just voted in this year's Goodreads Choice Awards, and I am really sad to see that so many of the really good books I have read and enjoyed this year weren't included on that list. Bear with me, there is relevance. Novels such as Babylonia, Ghostsmith, Otherworldly and Costanza weren't anywhere. Nobody had selected them for any category. I mean, granted, 2 of them would have been in historical, one of them would probably have been in YA fantasy and the other one in fantasy general, but they weren't anywhere. In fact, only 2 of my top reads for this year, The Book of Doors and Voyage of the Damned, made it into the final round, and only a few more than that made it into the first round. So where am I going with this, and how does it relate to From Blood and Ash? From Blood and Ash in 2020 didn't only make it through to the second round, it won in the romance category, because romantasy didn't exist. Had it been released a few years later, it would have been lumped in with romantasy novels in that completely new category. But that's not important right now. This book was popular enough, and that's what the Goodreads Choice Awards are. They are a popularity contest, to make it through the rounds and win in the finals. So what was it up against in 2020 when you think about the books that came out in that year? Well, in this case, rom-coms. Because books like House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas and The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab, which should have won and didn't, and Empire of Gold by S.A. Chakraborty were running in the fantasy category. Does it seem weird that a book about vampires, gods, and mystical powers was in the same category as Spoiler Alert by Olivia Dade and Beach Read by Emily Henry, when books that are of the same genre were in fantasy? Was it to give one of them a chance of winning against one of the Sarah J. Maas releases? As I said, Addie LaRue should have won, but the Sarah J. Maas book did, because it's a popularity contest we're talking about. I really do wish that they had one that was a little bit less, what got the most ratings this year? Because but anyway, I honestly don't personally rate many of these book prize things. I don't look at a book and go, oh, that won the Booker Prize, so it has to be amazing, or that won the Pulitzer Prize. Though, to be honest, last year's Nobel Prize author has written some incredible novels, one of which appears on my top 20 every single time I write it down, because Paradise is a fantastic novel that is hugely underrated and you should read it. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. Let's get back to my opinion of From Blood and Ash. The story is set in a fantastical kingdom governed by a rigid caste system where gods, mortals, and otherworldly creatures interact, but the interactions are so limited, and it's clear that there are massive secrets at the core of this society. The one thing I will say about this series is the world building is great. Yes, a lot of it is done through a very forced narrative, and it's potentially unnecessary exposition, but it is far better world building than I've experienced in books like Divine Rivals and Ruthless Vows, both of which I feel were hugely lacking in this respect. And I do admire the fact that we got the history. And I think that in the offshoot series, we get even more because it's the prequel. Again, if you know, please tell me. But there is this exchange of information. Does it occasionally feel like an info dump, as was mentioned in one of the reviews? Yes, it does. But it's quite helpful, because I'd rather it were in the book and in the story than we had a huge glossary at the back or an index at the front that gave us information about, oh, this character is this person, and oh, this god is this one, and he's related to this, because that would spoil so much of it. I'm not saying this book is perfect, because it's not. There are so many things within the story that I think could have been done better. And yeah, one of the things that I honestly find quite irritating about a lot of romantasy and fantasy novels that are being released today is the names of the main characters. Okay, so Hawke, Flynn, the main character whose name really is Castile Denier. Castile kind of works. And isn't Castile the name of a character in the originals? But that's neither here nor there. That name works for me, though I really do wish he'd stop referring to his love of tasting Poppy and her honeydew. We are keeping this PG, guys. I'm not going there. But Poppy is following this routine, this rule that somewhere someone has created that says every single female heroine in a romantasy has to have a stupid name. Selena, spelt Celaena from Throne of Glass. Feyre from ACOTAR. Fire from the novel Fire. Katsa. And Signa, who is, I believe, from Belladonna. All of these are leads in their own series, And the names are so complicated that you need to actually have a phonetic spelling of a phonetics for the name because it's so difficult to pronounce. But having the name Penelope groups our lead in this book in with these characters. However, she is referred to so rarely by this name. Thank you, whoever decided to nickname her Poppy. It makes her not relatable because she's a fantasy character who is descended from the gods or whatever. At this point, you do not know who she is. She has no idea who she is. She is under the assumption that she is the Maiden and she has been blessed and she is going to save the Ascended. And her name is Penelope in that role. But everybody else calls her Poppy. Or in the case of Hawke / Castile, he names her Princess. And I actually kind of like that. It has this element of derogatory tone when he is being sarcastic, but it can also be quite a beautiful, loving name like Sweetheart. And he doesn't think that Sweetheart suits her, and she's not hugely impressed at him calling her Princess, but that chemistry is there. And I like that. I like the fact that it makes her seem stronger. And she does come across as one of these, not quite a Mary Sue, because she isn't perfect at everything and she's not the most beautiful creature on the planet and she's not amazing in every aspect of her life. But she has elements of that. She is good. When she learns a skill, she maintains it and she builds upon it. So, yeah, it is kind of complicated. However, she is incredibly lonely. She has been isolated for her entire life because the Duke and Duchess who rule the kingdom she lives in, though there is a king and queen of blood who are in charge of everything, the Duke and Duchess have raised her for much of her life. And they have ensured that she is so isolated that people don't feel they can tell her anything. No gossip gets to her ears because she has been removed from everything. I honestly believe that while the rest of the book reads quite easily, the opening scenes, which many had issue with, where Poppy is trying to ensure she gets a small chance at experiencing adventure when she goes to the tavern, the Red Pearl, is actually my favourite moment because it's awkward. And I honestly think that awkward is human. And yeah, I know these characters aren't really human. They are ascended, they are divine, they are vampire, which is this particular culture's word for vampire, or they are changelings or wolves or whatever. It reminds me of a scene in Tangled, though this scene is slightly more adult in theme than anything you're going to find in that particular Disney movie. And there are moments where I think of Hawke Flynn as Flynn Rider, and I don't know if it's because of his name, but there are moments where I do think those two kind of mesh and get a bit confused in my head. Of course, Hawke is charismatic, hypnotic, incredibly handsome, and immediately has the more naive and inexperienced Poppy under his spell. However, she is not that easily manipulated, and this is quite admirable. And it also leads into the trope that I enjoy the most when it comes to this kind of book, that of enemies to lovers. I prefer that to any other. I'm not a huge fan of he's my brother's best friend or he's really grumpy and I'm really happy. So the grumpy ex-sunshine one, absolutely cannot stand that. Full stop. Sorry. I'm not sure why, but the way that this plays out feels quite organic. Admittedly, it's not completely that way, and there are times when the moments that Poppy and Castile / Hawke are together are quite frustrating. There is a lot of repetitiveness in his communication with her. And it does feel like sometimes he's flogging a dead horse with the, oh, well, this is this and this is this. I'm not going to give it all away because it's a spoiler. As someone does point out multiple times in their single 1-star review of this book, if I read the word honeydew one more time, I may flip. And that is me saying that. But I think there is a lot to be said for the way that this story has been told. It merges the worlds together quite well. It's a fantastic escape. And I do think that sometimes I look at books and I judge them too harshly because I'm not immediately getting into them. I'm not saying that about ACOTAR, and I've said this several times about that particular series. I read the first 2 books of that series. That was nearly 1,000 pages. And not at any point when I was reading it did I think, oh, I can't wait to see what happens next. Whereas when I finished From Blood and Ash, I immediately went to the bookcase and got the second book. And I now have 4 of the 5 existing books in that series on my shelf. The fifth one's on my Christmas list. So I'm hoping that somebody in my family has purchased it for me, because I only have books on my Christmas list. Oh, and a few pairs of earrings. But anyway, yeah, what I couldn't wait to find out was what happened next. And I think for me, that was the most important thing. It was a great way to distract me from everything going on in the outside world, because as I said earlier, it's been a bit of a fortnight for me. So yeah, I enjoyed that. And I liked the fact that it was a great escape. Themes that make the book. There are 3 core themes in this book, at least from my perspective. The first one is freedom and duty. Poppy is struggling with the constraints of her role. She knows that she has a duty to be the maiden. Her role within society is to be the maiden. She is seen as a savior. She is going to help her people, the people that she has grown up with, the people who have been looking after her for most of her life. She is going to free them from suffering and help them to defeat the Atlanteans, who have seemingly created the Craven to destroy them. Of course, at the other end of this, she is a young adult who has never experienced life. Her brother has ascended, so she no longer has family within the kingdom. She never sees him. She occasionally gets a letter, but they feel detached. He never mentions his wife, who he married upon his ascension, and she never gets a chance to see him. So she has that, there are questions, and everybody asks questions. When you get to a certain point in your life, you start saying to yourself, well, what really is the point of that? Most of mine are, why do I really have to pay taxes? I think that's a question that a lot of adults ask themselves when they see their pay packet. But anyway, she's asking herself, why am I doing this? Why have I been cut off? What else is there for me to experience? I see other people doing these things, getting married, having families, growing together, feeling and finding love. And I am isolated. I'm not allowed to go anywhere on my own. I have no freedoms. So understandably, she's questioning all these things. And all of these changes are happening at the same time. She knows that she is about to ascend because she's reached her age of majority. But she's never experienced anything. And she knows that when she ascends, she's never going to get a chance to experience everything or anything. So there is that battle within her of, I have my duty, but I want to learn stuff. So they understandably clash. And in the first book in the series, there is that clash of, I know I need to do this. It's the thing I've been brought up for. I'm the only person who can do it. People are depending on me. And well, why can't I do that? I want to find this. I'm seeing all my friends. My brother's gained this wonderful thing. Why am I not allowed to get it? There's no promise. At the end of the rainbow, as it were, there is no promise. It's just duty, duty, duty. And it's exhausting. And she's also struggling with the questions that she has about, well, why can't I have that? Why do I have to live this way? Then you have truth and deception. obviously those two are reverses of the same coin. The story within this book explores the impact that the lies she has been told her entire life have upon her and her behaviour. And she has to try and pick her way through the lies that both sides of this war are having. They're both telling her things. Hawke's telling her, oh, well, my people are doing this. And the Duke and Duchess, who she's known her entire life, despite the fact that the Duke is horrific and he's abusive towards her, she's got them telling her another thing. Oh, his people are this person is evil. These people are evil. The person who came before you was killed by the leader of this group, and he's awful, and this is your duty, and these people love you and you love them. While Hawke is telling her on the other side, well, actually, these people are telling you lies. So she has got to try and pick her way through and discover not only which side of the battle she wants to be on, but who is actually telling her the truth, and what is the purpose behind any of the lies that she's been told. And that is complicated for anybody. If somebody you have trusted your entire life, you discover has been lying to you, are you going to trust anybody else? So we have that battle, which then comes to fruition with the discovery that the person who has been wooing her and seducing her into his bed is no more honest than the people who he's been telling her have been lying to her whole life. So that is the final theme. It's that the love is the third side of the triangle. You've got the truth and deception. And at the bottom, you've got the fact that this person who claims to love you, in fact, multiple people who've claimed to love her have been lying to her. Even her brother knows the truth about ascension, whether he understands that the actual ascension is the lie, or he understands how it came about. He knows that at the end of it all isn't redemption. So it's really complicated, and I like that. I don't always like that. I sometimes find that I want to read something really straightforward and simple and everything's laid out for you. But there are so many little pockets of deception within this book that even as a reader, you've got to try and figure out who's been lying. And you don't get to the bottom of that in the first book, just so you know. If you're looking for something like this, or you loved this and want something else, then maybe you'll love these. There are so many, probably far too many to mention by name, but I am going to list a few books I know I have personally enjoyed over the last few months. And if you haven't already tried them, then I would definitely recommend you give them a go. Bonesmith and Ghostsmith by Nikki Powell-Preto. I have mentioned these several times, but my recommendation stands. A wonderful duology that has been perfectly and beautifully crafted. The story centres on Wren, who has been disowned by her domineering warrior father and sent to die on the borderlands. It's a tale of distorted family history merged with Norse mythology. The final book is a brilliant climax to the story that begins in the first one. Tales of Valkyrie warriors and secrets. It's brilliant. Honestly, I seriously recommend it. And with the final book in the trilogy, Faithbreaker, being released in March next year, I honestly think you should delve into the world of Kissen, Skedi, Inara and Elagast in the first two books of the series, Godkiller and Sunbringer by Henna Kana. Another book I'd say is worthy of picking up is Voyage of the Damned. It's the only book on this list that's actually in the Goodreads Choice Awards this year and made it through to the second round in, I believe, debut novels category. It's a fun read, and it's sort of an Agatha Christie meets fantasy on the open seas. Heirs to the powers of their nation gather on a ship to journey to the origin of their mystical wealth, and then the murders begin. So who better to solve them than the one misfit who has yet to discover what his power is meant to be? I don't think you could find anyone better, and it is a wonderful read. Well, the countdown to the end of the year has officially begun, and while I do have a lot of reading to do, I am also sadly in the position where I've had to say goodbye to a job and at the same time to a very close friend in the space of a single week. The job I'm fine about, but the friend I am not. She sadly passed away at the end of November, and she was the one I spoke to most about books. A lot, actually. Every week we'd have a 90-minute call on a Sunday afternoon, and we'd have exactly the same conversation where she'd say, I read a book this week, and I'd say, you did? What was it? Did you like it? And she'd say, I knew you'd ask me that. Hang on. And go and have a look to see what it was because she didn't remember. She lived an adventurous life, travelled a lot, spent time with many friends, and even in retirement, she didn't have 5 minutes to herself, belonging to multiple clubs, Tai Chi, Mahjong, choirs, walking groups, you name it, she did it. In fact, in retirement, she was probably much busier than she was when she was working. But saying goodbye is very hard. In fact, I might cry when I've finished recording this. Her passing put a lot of things in perspective for me. So while she only infrequently listened to the podcast and she really didn't like it when I used voice effects or the background music, I wanted to take this opportunity to thank her. She was an incredible influence and a wonderful friend. And yeah, I am going to cry because it was incredibly sad to find out that she passed away because we were supposed to speak the following day. Anyway, deep breaths. There are just 2 more episodes scheduled for this month after this one, including the traditional end-of-year countdown. But I would love to hear from you. What was your favourite read this year? Send me a quick recording talking about the best book you read, or even send a written note to beingbookishpod@gmail.com so I can share it in the final review of 2024 on the 30th of December. So if you get your recordings in by the 21st, that would be fantastic. Well, that's it for this week, and thank you so much for listening. If you like what you hear, why not share it with your friends and family? And please post a star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any of the other podcatchers where you might listen. You can also follow me on Instagram as beingbookishpod, on X as being_bookish, and on Blue Sky as beingbookish. Alternatively, you can find these episodes and video content, which I've been lax in the last couple of weeks, understandably, on my YouTube channel, Ray Loves Reading, which can be found using the tag @beingbookishpod. Or, if you prefer to read everything, you can find some spoiler-free reviews and my reading tracker, plus all these links on my website, beingbookish.co.uk. Until next time, this is me saying farewell.